All right, welcome everybody. We'll get started in 2 minutes. And welcome and thank you for joining. Our session will start in 1 minute. Just a reminder, the session will be recorded and it will be available on demand, so you'll get an email within the next few days, along with the presentation. Also, if you do not wish to participate in a recorded session, this is the good time to disconnect. As you're joining, you'll be placed in silence mode. However, you can ask questions in the Q&A, so we'll encourage this to be a very interactive session. If you prefer to be more public, you can also leverage the hashtag #HitachiVentura_IoT. We'll get started in 1 minute. Hello and welcome to today's virtual conference, Accelerating and Optimizing Business Outcomes with Industrial IoT and AI, brought to you by IoT World and sponsored by Hitachi Ventura. I'm Lucian Fogoras, I'm the co-founder of IoT World, and on behalf of my team, our sponsors, the speakers, thank you for joining us. We will monitor the social channels, so feel free to send your questions, either leveraging the hashtag #HitachiVentura_IoT or the Q&A section. We have over 725 people registered for this event, representing 70 or about 80 countries, and we appreciate you spending the time with us. A large part of the value of these sessions is that it is live. It's an opportunity to engage with the speakers, and I'm super excited to have 4 very talented speakers. So as a catalyst for this, we will also be giving away a 1-year membership to our VIP community, where our speakers are invited to join after this. So that's vip.iot-world.com. That's about $999 value. To enter a random drawing, all you need to do is essentially type in your questions for the speakers in the Q&A. I'd like to introduce David McKnight from Hitachi Ventura Smart Solutions, who will be the MC and moderator for this virtual conference. David, welcome and thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucian. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone once again, and thank you for joining us. Today we have a very timely topic discussed by representatives from Forrester, Amazon Web Services, and Hitachi Vantara that are poised to provide keen insights into benefits of industrial IoT and artificial intelligence to optimize business outcomes. In these presentations and questions and answers in Q&A session, we will discuss how strategic collaborations can provide end-to-end experience and co-innovation to speed up the time to market and development of new Internet of Things or IoT applications. We'll cover what is coming for the channels in 2021 and beyond. What approach should you consider for growing your partner ecosystem and for the importance of co-innovating to develop new industrial Internet of Things applications? I'd like to kick off our session today by introducing Mr. Jay McBain, Principal Analyst for Global Channels, Partnerships, and Ecosystems at Forrester. Jay is one of the most visible and respected thought leaders in the global channel, named to the top 40 under 40 by Business Review, as well as numerous Channel Magazine top influencer lists. He's often sought out for us and others for industry guidance on future trends. He has spent his 27-year career in various executive sales channels, marketing and strategy roles with IBM, Lenovo, Channelize. Jay, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction, and I'm really glad to be here. I love this subject. I've loved this subject, you know, ever since my early days when I worked at IBM, and I was the kind of the futurist, and I would travel and talk to colleges and business groups, and I was on TV talking about, back then, pervasive computing and ubiquitous computing, and selling, in the early 90s, this idea that we would not only have multiple devices each, but the world would be ambient, and the world, would obviously have a very much of a digital vibe to it. So, I wrap it together 27 years later in this study of ecosystems, how all of this works, how it all gets monetized, and then working kind of from the top down, what this industry looks like. So if I were to just take the technology industry today, it's $3.5 trillion of spend between businesses and governments trying to look at how to advance, either their customer experience, their employee experience, their partner experience, how they expand their business, how they expand services. All of world trade kind of flows to, through, and with channels in one way or another. In the consumer world, we buy a car from a dealer, we buy a TV from a retailer, we buy peanut butter from a grocer. In the business world, in tech, for example, 64% of that is actually transacted through channels, and probably around 90% of it is channel assisted in some ways. So the study of this ecosystem is getting pretty interesting as every company in every industry is becoming a tech company. And the most obscure kind of professions are starting to come in and start talking about Internet of Things and industrial IoT, and have these conversations that even 18 months ago, we would have thought would be really kind of on the edge, is starting to come into the center. And so we used to measure the channel kind of in the middle at who sold technology. We looked at who managed technology on behalf of clients of all types. We looked at who the integrators were, and this growing software market, which 10 years ago had 10,000 players, today has 175,000 software companies. And 10 years from now is going to have 1 million. And then especially on the left side of this, we're watching emerging tech closely. We're watching IoT and industrial IoT. We're watching automation and AI. We're watching blockchain. We're watching drones and self-driving cars and quantum computing. There's 800,000 companies today that we have great interest in watching how they're building their company, how they're partnering with others in the ecosystem to drive value creation for customers, to leverage network effects, and then to co-innovate. And watching the scale of this in the millions has been fascinating. And the simple answer to why every company in every industry is becoming a tech company is exactly this. There are multiple buyers of technology now. It's not just a CIO or CTO. The majority of buying, by the way, if you look at cloud, happens outside of IT. Actually, 65% of it happens outside of IT. So the head of marketing in many companies spends more on technology than the head of IT themselves. So we're looking at different buyers of IoT. We're looking at sub-industries now. It's not just about looking at automotive. It's not looking at healthcare. It's looking at the 50-doctor mid-sized clinic inside of healthcare. Different than a dentist office, different than a small hospital. We're looking regionally, geographically, by country, by state, by province, by city. We're looking at the different segments. How a 50-doctor clinic works differently than maybe a 500-doctor hospital versus differently than how a Fortune 500 company would look at IoT is really important. And then the categories. A few years ago, we used to talk about hardware, software, and services. And kind of IoT would kind of go into the hardware. Well, today, we're talking about 26 categories of technology with 200 subcategories. You can't talk about IoT security without talking about the 7 layers below it and then the 17 layers below that. There are 35 million opportunities today in the market, and there's no vendor of any size or type that can cover this level of scale without a big ecosystem and channel to be able to address it. And this is where I sit. This is kind of the crux of where I sit. I thought it would be interesting today to kind of review that we get to talk to 690,000 buyers every year. And given the pandemic and given social unrest in parts of the world and murder hornets and other things that we've gone through, we're really interested in where the money's going and what state of mind and psychology of the buyer is today. And what's interesting, the number one trend overall and where the money's going is around automation. Automation of workflows, automation of processes and business logic. We've seen explosions, triple and quadruple digit growth in RPA, robotic process automation. BPA, business process automation. All of these SaaS and infrastructure companies, you'll hear from AWS in a few minutes, with these no-code, low-code environments driving incredible growth, upwards of 50% growth in the multi-cloud, hybrid cloud world. Number two is exactly that, accelerating cloud. We knew for the last decade that this has been growing, and now we're on an exponential growth curve. Last week, you would have saw Microsoft report 50% growth on Azure. That's after reporting 48 and then 47. That's 3/4 inside of COVID. Google Cloud would reported 54% growth. You've seen the big SaaS companies, at 30+% growth. The AWS guy got a really nice promotion last week. There is absolute focus on lifting into cloud. And this is where it gets interesting for IoT. The first two are very interesting. And then as you start to study the edge, this isn't just a PC and Zoom UCAS story. This is a story about complete change of a remote topology, a residential style topology. And this acceleration of ubiquitous computing, pervasive computing, and how companies are transforming, the compliance, the risk, the security, all the things that come around it, redundancy and continuity. There's massive opportunity that is kicked out on industrial IoT. And this is where, again, millions of companies are starting to come in to the conversation. And then four, early in the pandemic, everyone was in survival mode, trying to figure out the lay of the land and what this was going to look like. Well, a few months in, we knew of the K-shaped recovery. If you're an industry like hospitality, retail, restaurants and things, it was a tough slog, and it still is. But for most other industries, they turned into thrive mode quickly, and they're starting to invest heavily in customer experience, rethinking, curbside service, rethinking how they work and sell to customers, e-commerce and marketplaces, how they drive employee experience, because it's been a tough year, how they drive partner experience. All of this, became an IoT opportunity. And in the industrial world, manufacturing world, they were rethinking very, basic parts of their supply chain and how to take it forward. So in my last 10 minutes, I want to talk about kind of some of the things that we see going forward. And if you're dialing in today, thinking about your business, thinking about those 35 million opportunities, think about these ecosystems, I want to kind of give you some trends that might be interesting of where, and I'm a Canadian, so we get to talk about where the puck is going to be. And, first and foremost, we're all watching the different buyer. I mentioned the different buyer of who's making technology decisions today, but we're watching demographic shifts, where in 4 to 5 years, the majority of those buyers will be millennials. We're watching changes in psychology and behavior. We're watching people on these digital-only journeys, where the majority of cloud purchases today are made after a digital-only journey, and it's changing everything. And it's putting the force back on ecosystems to make it work. We're seeing an explosion of different models. Of those 175,000 software companies I mentioned, the majority of them are going into a product-led growth model. They're enticed by Zoom and Slack and Dropbox and others who have figured out this, point of at the 40-minute mark of talking to your customer, they're going to hang up on you unless you put in your credit card number. They're thinking about different ways of monetizing. Direct to consumer. A lot of the future of buying in business is going to look a lot more consumer-based. So, we know about Dollar Shave Clubs and how to buy a mattress at home. A lot of these strategies, D2C, are coming into the work world. And then the explosion of marketplaces has absolutely changed the fabric of how economics work out in the ecosystem. But for all of us, it comes back to the buyer. I mentioned that there's 35 million conversations going on every day in IoT. And when I start to map all of those conversations, whether it's at a mid-sized clinic with 50 doctors or it's at a major forklift manufacturer, I'm starting to figure out, because I know that there's an average of 5 partners attached to every one of those conversations, especially in a digital-only journey. So if I can get more predictive of who is there and who has the most influence, not only by company, but by people, I start to understand what this looks like and how I can shape out my own place in that ecosystem. So this is interesting. The second biggest trend is 76% of CEOs in every company of every size, in every company, in every country, think that their current business model will be unrecognizable in 5 years. That's an Accenture stat. So when you ask these 76% of CEOs, the number one reason why is ecosystems. So let's step into, an industrial IoT example. A forklift manufacturer who adds, some sensors, basic sensors to this forklift, now starts sending out 1,000 data points per second to the construction company, to the builders, to the architects. That ecosystem now has the data, the location data, the temperature, the humidity, obviously the weight and what the forklift actually does is lift stuff. That becomes the value equation. And for all of the innovation around that and the value creation around that becomes less about the forklift and more about building bigger, faster, cheaper, better buildings. So if you go to the website, it looks like an AWS website. You don't see charts like this for forklift manufacturers. Well, guess what? This is the value proposition. It's not about the size of the tires or the thickness of the steel. It's about these 1,000 data points per second and how to leverage that to get to a better business outcome. And guess what? If you click once more on the website, there's a digital ecosystem for everything. So this company looks more like Tesla than it does a forklift manufacturer. And yes, they have hundreds of dealers spread around the world and traditional dealer style, channel management. But now they've got an ecosystem that's 10 times larger. They're partnered with AWS. They're partnered with IBM and SAP and Oracle. They're partnered with many of the participants on this phone call to go and translate those 1,000 data points into new software companies, new hardware IoT opportunities, and new levels that will drive better business outcomes. And I could give you 1,000 examples across 27 industries that this is all happening in real time. And I'm fascinated with the people that are in the room having those conversations. And those conversations are not about how much the dealers are selling and how to market or enable them better. It's about these three things. How does 1 + 1 = 3? For, in this case, the construction company and the builder and the architect that gets value out of this. How do we access network effects? How does AWS use this forklift to get to customers that they would have never got to? And vice versa. How does the forklift use AWS to get into a broader conversation that they would have never been a part of? And then number 3, it all comes to this. It's a new level of co-innovation. So when I said there's going to be 1 million software companies, the 825,000 new software companies that are going to be created in the next decade is exactly at this point. That somebody's going to figure out some way to use those 1,000 data points in a very creative and unique and scalable way that you can sell to multiple people that solve a really big problem and maybe saves $1 million for every building that's built from this day forward. That becomes a very valuable company. There's a lot of building going on, but that's one example out of 825,000 innovation. And I can think of all kinds of IoT activity here that we could wrap this, forklift with a lot of other enablement to generate thousands of more data points that again drive better business outcomes. So the next trend is this idea of everything shifting to subscription and consumption models, which in an IoT world kind of makes sense. In obviously a SaaS and subscription model of cloud, multi-cloud makes sense, but you're starting to see some changes. IBM, which I worked for 17 years and has led the patent race for 28 years, many of those patents in IoT, just jettisoned their services group of 450,000 people and are now purely 100% subscription consumption, hybrid, multi-cloud, and AI, and Red Hat leading the way. A few weeks before that, Dell Technologies, $93 billion, 7 companies, EMC, VMware, across the board, are now going to 100% subscription consumption. Very big change. And obviously part of the infrastructure, behind the scenes. Cisco, obviously a massive IoT player for years and years and years, well, from the very beginning, going 100% subscription and consumption model. HPE, major player, is not only announced that, but they've been on this journey for 3 years with GreenLake. They're going to be there next year. In 11 months, they're going to be there. This completely disrupts the entire industry. So I look at all the companies sitting beneath ecosystems and what makes them tick. And These are part of the 175,000 companies, but here's the 183 companies that make all that work. And I get to look ahead in their roadmaps to see how ecosystems will work and how channels will work. And so my final prediction is around this changing ecosystem value. And again, in IoT, in industrial IoT, we've always struggled with a supply chain linear thinking. And in the industry for financial folks, it's gross to nets. What is the 20 to 30% front end margin of an IoT kind of deal, and what does that look like? Do I want to resell IoT? Second is the back end margin, the 3 to 5% that comes in for volume rebates and new customer bonuses and market development funds. All of that doesn't make a lot of sense in a hyperscale world of multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, IoT. That just doesn't make sense. So we're lifting out of this old thinking of a supply chain and kind of front and back end margins, and we're getting into these multiplier effects now. And this is going to be driven through marketplaces, which grew more in 3 months last year than 10 years combined before that. And the connective tissue of your average industrial IoT deal will involve all kinds of infrastructure, all kinds of data, ISVs, integrators. There's going to be hardware, software, and services attached. And today there's 7 layers on average to every single deal. And so as we look forward, this is going to expand. And I'm really interested in the icing here, the connective tissue that drives the collaboration, that drives the enablement, that drives the onboarding of ecosystems, and in the end, drives people working together to drive that new innovation and unlock future opportunity. And then the monetization of who makes money off of all of that, becomes pretty interesting. But the fact is there is unlimited opportunity. I just mentioned the 4 top opportunities for 2021. All of those continue for the next decade. And for all of us on this call, there is unlimited opportunity to figure out where we are in this cake, because on every one of those 35 million conversations, you may show up in some other place. You may be the purple layer on the bottom, or you may be the red layer for $10,000 on top. It doesn't matter. The fact is you've got to get into these conversations, be a part of them, add your value, and everyone in the end, the business outcome drives upwards, and everyone, succeeds in an ecosystem. So thank you very much for hosting me. Obviously, we'll stick around for Q&A at the end, and happy to dig in. Or if you want to hit me on LinkedIn or Twitter, I can chase down one of those numbers or research behind some of these trends if you'd like to connect with me at some point after this session. So I will pass it back to Dave, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Jay. As I was listening to Jay, I think we're often understanding the downstream impacts of this pandemic we're going through. I'm sure this is going to define the next 10 years, not just the 10 months that we've seen to sometimes be focused on. Probably is going to be defining the success and failures of a whole generation of business and operations leaders. But Jay, as a fellow Canadian, I'm going to steal your hockey analogy that we have to remind ourselves that leaders, operations leaders, and business leaders more than ever need to keep their heads up and do more than just keep their stick on the ice. Thanks again. Next, we have Sid Verma, General Manager of the Global Manufacturing Practice at Hitachi Vantara, and my esteemed colleague. He's focused on incubating and growing the services and solutions footprint at our discrete and process manufacturing customers. He specializes in oil and gas, power utilities, industrials manufacturing, and aerospace. Sid brings more than 20 years of strategic problem solving and delivery experience, advising C-suite and senior officials to help organizations transform their business, monetize new technologies, and improve their bottom line. Over to you, Sid.
Thank you, David. I appreciate the introduction. So as David mentioned, I am in the manufacturing practice in Hitachi, and I live and breathe manufacturing. So the goal is how to make the world a better place and how to get it for the manufacturer so that we can get this thing going. Next slide, please. So let me start with something familiar to us, like industrial shocks. Like we live through shocks, and I'm guessing you will agree with me that over the last 10 years, the shocks have kind of gone a little bit more severe and more often, like the flooding, the fires, And then the trade wars that we had, we kind of, I guess, forgotten. I mean, all these things kind of had to make, the industry had to adapt. And then came COVID, which was a super shock that I guess nobody was prepared for it. And Jay kind of went into a little detail of that. We were in the survival mode, and then kind of that led to a burning platform that led to transformation. But I mean, some of these shocks kind of fundamentally changed the way we worked, correct? I mean, some of this was actually a shock to me that when our life depended on it in US, we couldn't even make masks, like, and we waited and waited and we still couldn't make masks, like, correct? I mean, this is how like supply chains are set, and it takes time to change. And usually before, we used to take a workaround, and it took a long time for us to change. But now we had to change, and a lot of the companies did the change. So today I wanted to focus a little bit on how that change has happened, like how we have learned during this time to change ourselves and some of our clients with the same journey. And I wanted to focus a little bit on the small and medium-sized clients. And the reason being, the big clients typically have the resources in-house and the talent to make the change. But the small and medium companies which were making, let's say, the mask and the syringes, I mean, they had to do this thing on a very small budget and in a very fast and agile way, and kind of on a burning platform, because that's what needed to survive. So that would be the essence of my story. Like, what did we learn and how did we actually facilitated this change? Next slide, please. So let me give you a little background on Hitachi Vantara. I'm like, Hitachi is a common brand name, like people do recognize it. It's like a 110-year-old large industrial company. We as the Vantara, which is a US-based company, like we focus on the OT side of it and the digital side of it. And the goal for us being created is to help drive that digital innovation back into Hitachi, learn those things, and kind of deploy that into external clients. So we do have like a double mandate. And one of the core things I wanted to share is like we have lots and lots of factories, over like hundreds of factories, and they are in the different stages of industrial transformation, like in the industrial journey. Some are very small businesses, some are very large businesses. So our journey kind of reflects and learnings that we have done same way that we actually face with the external clients. Next slide, please. So based on what we have learned, like we kind of created a intelligent manufacturing journey, because you need a structure to approach transformation. That otherwise things do not go always as planned. So we call it the intelligent manufacturing journey. I mean, I know it looks like a linear journey, but it tends to be a lot more continuous in nature. And it's built on the continuous improvement philosophy from Japan. So we followed it for our own companies, and something we learned, improved it, and something we are very happy to share with our clients and our partners. And we also call it the staircase to value. It means as you jump the levels, you start getting a lot more value for it. And from our experience within our factories and our clientele, most of them are in level 1 and 2. I mean, a lot of it is human driven. So I mean, level 1 and 2 is sufficient for most of the small and medium companies. And because the ROI of automation was not always there. And nowadays, given that technology has become relatively cheap in terms of storage and compute, like working with AWS a lot of times, these hurdles that were there for small, medium businesses have kind of slowly gone down. And then we are seeing a lot more company pushing to level 3 and level 4. And I'll spend some time today later on to talk about one of our client journeys. So what is the difference between level 1 and 2 and 3 is basically, we all experience this, correct? Like we have built heterogeneous environment over time of like assets, which are production assets. And then we kind of, some are connected, some are not connected, different ages, different protocol, different vendors. I mean, what you see in the IT side, where everything kind of seamlessly connects to your iPhone or internet, like the industrial side does not have that luxury, because they were created more in a isolation. Every company kind of championed their own protocol and have a lot of experience around their own machine. But as a manufacturer, you want to make everything work together, and that's not always has been an easy thing. So our challenge has been to get to level 3, where you start getting insights, you start optimizing. It means you need to kind of manage the whole environment. And that's why it tends to be a continuous journey. You can't really get this thing done in like one straight line. So let's go to the next slide. I'm sure you heard about the purgatory of POCs and POVs or MVPs. And I mean, I guess we live it ourselves. I'm sure you live it too. And I'm sure Jay will agree to that most of the companies have kind of got stuck in transformation, this purgatory. Like for what I learned, only 11% kind of made out of the pilot stage to broader adoption. So for us, like this is kind of, when we look at our own 800 factories, it's like we have to look at what are the fundamental things that need to drive the initiative. We can't just keep getting stuck. So what we found was what is important here is to set up the clear goals, right? And identify some of those areas of improvement. Start small always, because you never know. Everything is a little bit unique. And we do still pursue a proof of value, because you need a leadership alignment, ROI enablement and calculation, and then you need to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And a lot of the time, don't do it just for the technology's sake, although technology is equally important, and focus on the result. And a lot of the time, at least for the small, medium businesses, even for the large companies like who haven't done that journey, having an experienced partner helps a lot in this journey. So you don't actually end up doing the same mistakes. Next slide, please. So every journey, I guess, we should abide by some guiding principles and some roadmaps items. This I placed it out for everybody to use, because it's based on what we learn and our understanding of how things should be done. We learned like a wholesale rip and replace, typically in manufacturing, tends to be too expensive, and it's not very easy for companies to do that transformation. I guess the long are the days gone for 7-year SAP transformations. I guess people want things to be done very fast. Everything has to be digital, in the sense of even what Jay was mentioning happening in the like pure digital enterprise world is happening to the industrial world too. So what I am suggesting here is a systematic approach helps, focusing on what's best for the business, specific value stream to address the core of technology, reuse again and again, and then accommodating existing organizational for change management. I mean, everybody says that, but like doing this where we take the people whose job is to do these things along with the journey, with the technology change and digitization, is extremely sensitive and extremely important. So means we have to kind of give equal importance to change management as we give it to the ROI. Without that, it doesn't really happen. Next slide, please. So this slide kind of shows you on the left side the intelligent journey I talked about. How do you get from 1 to 4? And then you see on the right side some of the building blocks for us. Correct? Like so you want to start the staircase of value, but we start looking at individual persona groups within a manufacturer. So maintenance groups, production groups, quality groups, supply chain group, health and safety groups, and they all want different types of similar data. So it's a similar kind of data, similar kind of KPI, but it's a little bit different systems, different way to calculate it. So we start building the solution blocks, and kind of over time in our Hitachi life, we have built this thing out of the box. So you kind of get there out of the box and then start moving up the journey. Next slide, please. This is kind of our way to how do we build this thing? Like we can't build all of it all the time. Like we're not making an ERP. I mean, this is digital transformation. It helps us by a building block, build one at a time. So what you see as the red blocks are the core areas around which people's jobs and personas are tied. And then we start building IT, OT type of solutions on the top of it and customize it to every client. And we build it based on the complexity of the environment of a client. And as much as can be prepackaged, as much as IP can be available out of the box is kind of our goal. So functionally, we align this way. We build functionally and also technologically. We work a lot with our cloud partners, especially AWS, and like with their help, like these services that are underneath these solution blocks are containerized microservices, and they can be deployed wherever you need to be. And they are relatively cheap and fast to scale, and that kind of lends us to a real faster digital transformation, allows us to jump the POV purgatory and get some real value out of it. Like next slide, please. So just closing the loop on the staircase to value. The central idea is to actually accelerate the value creation, getting from descriptive to prescriptive. And then we started calling the level 4 as symbiotic, customer inclusive, like Jay mentioned a lot of it about it. So this is kind of also we are striving to. Very hard for industrial manufacturers. A lot of them never see their customers. There are too many gaps. But nowadays, as the forklift example Jay was giving, means the manufacturers are seeing how their products are used, and we want to bring this in to close the loop because it's quite important for the manufacturers to know how the product is being used for. And the important part is like to follow this journey, hopefully get some guidance from a trusted partner who has done this before. Next slide, please. So this is kind of some of the deployments that we did. The way we do it is out of the box turnkey solution kits, and they are persona based. So if you are a production manager, we have a persona for production, and it comes and kind of helps you align to see some of the important things on your factory. There is a global view, there is a production view by line. You can start seeing bottleneck information. Next slide, please. Similar view is available for a quality manager to see how is the quality of the product coming out of the line, and they can monitor in semi-real time, sometimes even real time. And then, of course, the last one is a digital thread or digital twin of the solution. So you can start seeing overall how things are progressing as you're optimizing quality versus production. So this slide kind of talks about how do you take the journey. Correct. Like everybody will like to follow the staircase to value. I'm sure it's not a disputed journey, but like typically it starts with a discovery, understanding the business and goals, a little bit of a consulting led. Then means I put in 4 buckets for define and assess in the sense because not everybody wants the same thing. Some teams have a lot of inherent knowledge base. Some have already started this journey. Some have done some POCs. So we look at it from different point of view. Sometimes you need envisioning. Okay, how do I start the journey? Sometimes it's like, okay, my business strategy requires me to change. What should we do? Sometimes it's operational improvements coming from bottoms up. And sometimes there is just a need for automation. Kind of that allows us to get to, okay, this is what I want. This is the architecture I want. This is the technology I want. Okay, let's start the journey. So you're a lot more structured. You're following the journey. You're following the guiding principles. And from there, once you get in, we help you deploy this and operationalize it out of the box. And the last thing that I want to leave you behind on this slide is the digital COE concept, correct? Just deploying a technology usually do not take you far enough. Adoption doesn't happen. So having a center of excellence around it, allowing you to do change management, continuous improvement, continuous training is where you reap the benefit of that journey. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that shows that we take digital transformation seriously. We kind of eat our own dog food. So this is our Omeka Work Factory. It has been recently recognized as a lighthouse by World Economic Forum. And this is where kind of we did a lot of our own journeys. And like, it's not like a one day switch the button and we get digital transformation. It's a long, continuous, hard journey that we have over time done. We're getting good at it, and then you can see some of the outputs we have got. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the same kind of concept we deployed to one of our larger clients. And it was an automotive client, kind of helped them follow the same journey. And then we started getting the same level of output, like and digitization in their journey, like reduction in the number of cars falling out of production line, uptime, like traditional KPIs that need to move the needle on. And this process allows you to do that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in the earlier part, like I wanted to focus this journey a little bit on one of the case studies for a small medium client, something that we have helped and learned. So I wanted to just show, because I wanted to talk about the democratization of digital technologies, how things have become cheaper and is available for small medium businesses, because they don't really have a lot of revenue base or asset to go after large, expensive transformations. So this story talks about a global supplier of commercial industrial vehicles. They are globally based, it's a part manufacturer, lots of factories, relatively small in size, and they serve a variety of industrial, discrete industrial clientele. And they have the traditional challenges to start with, right? They are like between level 1 and 2. They have a big end on board, and they have downtime issues, performance issues. They don't really understand their OEE. And a lot of the information that they get, like looking at like alerts and condition monitoring, is manual in nature. Like, so the paper-based, people draw, this is the route, and then they've tried to follow it. So it means they do not adopt very well to change. It's a lot of manual process. Next slide, please. So we followed the journey with them, like we talked about how we have done it in one of our own areas. We found out the key output they want to implement is they want to start seeing the operational effectiveness of their assets. And so level 1, they wanted a real-time OEE for most of the critical assets for production. So we kind of lighted up some of the lower levels, level 1 solution kits, and then focused on the maximize uptime, because that's what they wanted to go after, because they were one of the ones which have to increase production during the COVID times. And we found out that a lot of the information for maintenance was coming, required us to do a lot of signal processing. And it's hard to do signal processing. Traditional IoT systems cannot handle high frequency data. Next slide, please. So on the first side, we had to actually co-create a digital signal processing module. So if you're an engineer from background, you'll understand how difficult it is to start doing digital signal processing for a firm which is just a manual production line. So we set up digital signal processing module that allows them to do like risk, fault diagnostics, and then analytic and visualization on maintenance. And that data kind of start going into the solution that I was showing you, the maintenance insight solution that we help deploy for them. So once that data starts coming in, you start understanding the OEE of it. Then you start getting the anomalies in semi-real time. And once you get the base done, then you start getting the analytics on top, and you can start optimizing. And of course, the quality alerts also start coming in, because vibration turns out to be the biggest predictor of quality and failure in most of the asset classes. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the outcome we received from this project for the client, kind of a 25% reduction in machine breakdown. Basically, so the uptime really went up, means labor productivity went up, and people were able to see and plan and optimize production. I mean, that's kind of the big thing. Like when everything is kind of semi-manual, not connected, a lot of the decision-making gets delayed. Once you start getting digital KPIs, you can actually optimize things. And that kind of helps a lot, like just to start with. And here we were able to actually pinpoint a lot of their failures using a digital signal processing module, which is very hard to do in the IoT world, correct? Like people expect the data to be available nice and clean, but processing digital high frequency data is actually not that easy. So we have to do fast Fourier transforms, do some analysis, and like get from there, get to the machine condition monitoring. And this required some co-creation, which we typically do if we see it as a viable future area for us. Next slide, please. So this, Jay, can you go back one slide? Did we miss a slide? Okay, no problem. Let's go to the next slide. So just recapping what we talked about, basically, we're trying to get to a digital industrial transformation. A lot of the large companies have done it. You see all those press releases and people talk about, like, since the childhood, I've been hearing about the GE engine, but I am sure that GE has spent like millions and millions of dollars with hundreds of PhDs to get there. But now that we are pushing transformation to the common small, medium level companies, these are what I thought helped during our project. So a very well-defined roadmap, key alignment with the leadership on that roadmap, having a turnkey solution that allows you to not only do it as a one time, but like build operations for a long time. Not a ERP, but like something as a digital, smaller ERP that gets you to operations quality. If you get a partner that stays with you long term, it's helpful because this is not a one-time event. It's a long-term journey, so you need somebody to work with you for long term. And that could be a software partner, hardware partner, consulting partner. And the important part on the box 3 is pre-packaged industrial IP. I mean, a lot of this has been solved at other places. Trying to bring that IP in a pre-packaged way really kind of makes it cheaper and faster to deploy. And that's kind of my way of presenting the accelerated intelligent manufacturing journey. And I think I have one more slide. So this is my last slide. I hope you were able to kind of see the value in terms of following a roadmap, following a consulting approach, getting to a prepackaged IP, and drive some value. So we are getting to the point that like the factories are getting data driven. That is kind of really making a big jump in optimizations. Like no longer we are getting 2%, 3%, but we're getting a lot more, like a big jump. And that is, I guess, the value of Industry 4.0. And I hope this presentation was helpful in that. Thank you. Over to you, David.
Great. Thank you, Sid. Yeah, I mean, a takeaway and reminder for me is always that you kind of brought to light there is the operations objectives really remain not too far removed from what they were before. We're in a lot of cases, we're solving a lot of the same problems we have for the last 20 years, improving quality, improving throughput, assuring on-time delivery rates, supply chain visibility, safety, etc. But the major differences in 2021 are, as you pointed out, one, the urgency and priority of the problem, an urgency of priority of some of these, solving some of these problems. 2, the new tools and solutions available at our fingertips. And 3, mature practitioners to help the acceleration of that performance achievement. Thanks again, Sid. Our final presenter today, before our Q&A session that is Pugal Janakiraman, who is Worldwide Business Development for Industrial IoT at AWS, Amazon Web Services. Pugal is an industry professional with 25 years of experience in the automotive, trucking, and machinery industries around product development, manufacturing, and the aftermarket space. He has a proven track record in building and deploying large-scale industrial solutions around the world and has over 10 years of experience in running global industrial practice around bill of materials and configuration management. Pugal, thanks for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks, David. Good morning, good afternoon, all. Thanks for this participation. Let me share my slide and we'll go from there. Okay. You can see the screen, then go from there. Okay, today I'm going to talk about the solutions AWS is building to optimize and accelerate business outcomes, which is what I specialize in. Again, industrial IoT covers broad range of areas. Could be connected products or connected factory floor, topics like that. But today I'm going to talk about primarily around connected factories and Industry 4.0 initiatives and solutions we have available on accelerating the journey customers might want to take around Industry 4.0 topic or data-driven transformation, which they've been attempting to do for quite some time. Again, in close partnership with Hitachi, we are building quite a bit of solutions in this area, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Today's agenda I will touch upon is what are the key manufacturing industry trends we are seeing in the market. Again, very much aligned with what Jay talked about earlier in the presentation. What kind of impacts customers are seeing from a manufacturing production facility point of view if they adopt an Industry 4.0 journey or data-driven transformation which they're attempting. And what kind of solutions we have built on this front. And how do we get started? That's pretty much what I'm going to cover. So if I talk about the industry trends, this is what we are seeing happening in the manufacturing world. Data as an enabler is one of the biggest topics. Again, Industry 4.0 is all around data. It's around understanding the data better. Again, we are not talking about generating new sources of data. I'm talking about the data these production facilities have been generating for at least last 2 decades, because PLCs, SCADA devices, historians has been in the market for last 2 decades at least, if not more. And it has been generating data. But understanding the data, the compute environment or the compute power was never available. This unlimited compute which cloud offers was never available earlier. And also AI/ML tools to do big data analytics was never possible. Today, availability of both is changing the game where customers can understand the data better, which is coming out of millions of the machineries which they have across multiple facilities around the world. That's the first one. The biggest trend which is happening. The second one is around digitally executed manufacturing. Again, this is the key. Most of the industrial customers from a manufacturing plant floor point of view, they invested on millions of dollars on hardware equipment to achieve even a single-digit efficiency, improvement on their operational efficiency. But today with Industry 4.0, which is data-driven transformation, the promise of Industry 4.0 is you can achieve anything from 10 to 40% improvement in manufacturing efficiency if you understand the data better. That's a promise we are marching towards. Again, proven in quite a bit of implementations. So that's the next one. It's all around understanding the data better and digitally executing, streamlining your manufacturing process by aligning your IT and the OT world better. That's the next major trend we are seeing. Pretty much every major ask we are getting is around this. And again, Jay touched upon it. Every major manufacturer is switching from product into a service-based model. A good example is SKF offering lubrication as a service, Sandvik providing cutting tool as a service. Pretty much that trend has already started. So that is another major outcome which is shaping up the market, where machine tool vendors, cutting tool manufacturers, all of them are trying to switch into a service as an offering scenario. The other major activity is around connected products. Pretty much, whether it is autonomous cars or trucks, planes, vacuum cleaners, every one of it is connected. That's another major source of machine-generated data customers are trying to understand better, correlated back with the data coming out of the production facility so they can streamline operations all around the enterprise. It's not just manufacturing. R&D, purchasing, everybody wants to understand this data better so they can do their jobs better in their own environment. And last but not least is around sustainability. Huge interest for the customers and for Amazon. A lot of solutions we are driving in this space, whether it's energy optimization or multiple other topics like that. So this is the biggest trends we are seeing in the market. And what are the kind of benefits customers are seeing with a data-driven transformation? Again, there is a lot of numbers here. A lot of came from our partner Hitachi, where they have done a huge amount of work in this space, as Sid talked about earlier. Anything from 10 to 20 to 30% improvement overall in manufacturing efficiency, depending on the maturity of the customer, industry segment, and use cases what we are trying to go after. There is all sorts of numbers possible here. But again, if I have to go deeper into what is Amazon seeing here, the best example I can use is the largest industrial IoT initiative happening today, It's a partnership between AWS and Volkswagen. Volkswagen digital production platform vision is to streamline their manufacturing operation across 120 plus factory facilities around the world, and around 20,000 suppliers who are supplying parts to the auto industry to them. They are talking about 30% improvement in manufacturing efficiency. And again, this slide is a pretty wordy slide, but these are all public domain information. There is enough YouTube videos and public domain press releases done by Volkswagen and Amazon on this front on how they are on track to achieve this 30% efficiency and how they have rolled this digital production platform solution across 19 factories last year. So they're very much on track. This press release came late last year. I think they have progressed a lot more than this. This is what we are seeing. We have learned a lot, Amazon on this front, Amazon Web Services, and we have built services and solutions to support customers taking an Industry 4.0 journey or multiple other connected products journey. So if I have to go deeper into this, there are challenges associated with taking an Industry 4.0 journey and data-driven inferencing, because what that we are walking into is a brownfield market. This is not a greenfield environment. Even if I go into an autonomous driving or connected cars, a lot of things are happening now. But in manufacturing segment, you have to deal with legacy infrastructure at a plant floor. Because as I said, PLCs, SCADA devices are existing investment which is already in place, whether it is 56% of Rockwell PLCs in North America or similar number in Europe for Siemens. These are proprietary PLC devices, SCADA devices, or RTUs, real-time units we have to interface with to pull the data out. In addition to that, there are multiple protocols involved here. I have been in a plant floor in North America. In just one single plant, I have seen around 300 plus protocols in one single plant. For customers to do data-driven inferencing across this multiple protocol conversion, it's a major challenge for them. So for them to take this journey, it's not that easy for them. Again, Sid touched upon small and medium customers. Nearly most of the customers we deal with, small and medium, even larger customers, don't have the money power and the IT and OT knowledge to go build an Industry 4.0 solution, because they have to deal with integration with proprietary PLC, SCADA devices. Again, you cannot slow the production down. If Ford makes one car every 55 seconds, you cannot slow down the production if you are going to pull data out of the PLC. It still needs to run the production volume. And at the same time, you need to build an architecture which is hybrid between cloud and on-prem, because 100% production running in cloud is still some distance away. As of today, for the next couple of years, it is going to be a hybrid architecture where there is going to be a bunch of on-prem edge hardware devices where things are going to happen. And there is going to be unlimited compute power, which can do multiple things which an edge hardware cannot do in the cloud. And you have to architect a solution which spans between edge and cloud. And also deeper partnership with telecom providers, because if you're shifting MES system to the cloud, which is having a tight integration with your PLC devices, latency is a real problem. So we are having deeper partnership with telecom vendors where we can provide a private mobile edge if needed, and you can completely eliminate the latency issue with that kind of options out there. So we are working on a whole bunch of solutions in this area as well. Again, the point here, for customers to take this journey, they have to do quite a bit of undifferentiated heavy lifting, as we call in Amazon, which we don't want the customers nor partners to take. The consistent ask which came from customers are, is there a pre-built solution offering from Amazon and its partners where you can take away all this undifferentiated heavy lifting, take away the protocol conversion, take away the industrial machine connectivity with different PLCs, SCADA devices, and free up the data, provide us a configuration framework where we can configure an architecture which spans between on-prem and cloud, depending on your needs, and also solutions which is usually ignored today. I think, again, Sid touched upon POV, purgatory. Today, most of the time, this IT-ish, OT-ish project happen, and when VP of manufacturing comes over, his or her first question is, what is the business outcome coming out of it? How much improvement in uptime metrics or reduction in downtime metrics or quality metrics can you accomplish? These are the common questions which usually does not get answered. If the focus is around solving integration issues, developing an architecture to scale beyond one line into 30 factories, These are all areas where most of the customers we work with don't understand or don't have the skill set to do that. That's what we have done today. Amazon and its partners like Hitachi, we have come up with what we call it as an industrial machine connectivity solution. It takes our services like SiteWise, which is a first-class service for PLC connectivity and OPC UA server and multiple historian connectivity, deeply integrate with protocol conversion toolkits, whether it is Ignition or Kepware, certify a bunch of hardware as well as an edge hardware provider, and ingest the data into a framework which spans edge and the cloud. And we provide a very scalable data lake, which integrates not only the OT data I've been talking about, but also with IT data to provide near real-time visibility into metrics happening in the plant floor, whether it is OEE, uptime, cycle time metrics, or quality metrics, throughput metrics. We can report that. And in addition to that, we also provide asset modeling capability for your machine, line, and plant level asset modeling, where you can do a remote walkthrough of your facility and do root cause analysis when things go wrong. And we also provide a complete dashboarding layer with which you can visualize these metrics as well. So it is provided as part of this foundational offering. And once that is available, now all the solution which Sid talked about, we can leverage from partner like Hitachi, whether it is predictive maintenance, predictive quality, energy optimization, because we have made sure the data is available and a scalable framework is provided. Whether you want to deploy in one line or one single factory or 100 different factories around the world, we work with you to make sure that it can scale and we can take care of the architecture and all of those needs associated with that. That's what we have done. We launched this last year, July. There is a lot of interest with our customers to work with us and partner like Hitachi to go make this happen, make this Industry 4.0 into a reality. And our goal is to commoditize connectivity, commoditize protocol conversion, and provide you a framework where you focus on solving your business problem, which is what Amazon has done on this front. Okay. Again, we do everything in context of customer. Anything and everything what we build, whether it's a service or a solution offering like what I'm talking about, we build it with a real customer. Already touched upon Volkswagen, another major customer where we did a lot of work around this topic is Terex. They make machinery, and Genie is the brand. They want to streamline their warranty problem associated with paint quality. So we built a complete solution on top of connected factory offering to an industrial machine connectivity to go streamline that warranty as a predictive quality solution out there. So this is how we learned and built this offering as well. Okay. And the key use cases we are working with around customers, again, this is not an exhaustive list. I'm just using most of the common use cases we get. The first one is around root cause analysis. Things go wrong on a daily basis in a plant floor, whether it is something stopping or a breakdown happening, or even micro stoppages. There are 30-second stoppages because operator has to move away from the machine, or various other reasons in which there is micro stoppages happening. But over a period of time, this micro stoppage adds up and it comes to a loss in production at that plant floor facility, or it could be quality, throughput loss, various issues like that. For that, customers need data. Nearly 90% plus customers we work with today don't have access to the real-time data or near real-time data. They always operate against old data. It's not current data. And that's how they do their root cause analysis. In fact, when I talk about one single customer who makes one of the largest auto companies in the world, one of their premium facility, when something goes wrong, it takes them 15 minutes to access the data. And we are talking about $50,000 to $100,000 loss they are making every minute that particular line or machine is down. So if it takes 15 minutes, we are talking about $1 million loss. With this solution, we can provide them near real-time access to the data, condition monitor the machines, and also we can provide initial predictive algorithms with which you can understand all the anomalies happening out there for you to go look at which areas they have to focus on. And again, the root cause analysis with the data model I talked about, you can virtually walk down a plant, into a line, into a machine, into a component to understand what's going wrong. So we provide the capability. The other key use cases are predictive maintenance. Again, Sid touched upon it. Large assets, whether it's a paint shop, body and white machinery doing assembly in automotive industry. Customers do not want this machine to go down. They want to do predictive analytics around it so they can understand leading indicators to failure. Again, once the data is available, we have solution framework and partners like Hitachi who can provide solutions on top of it. The other major use case we are talking about is around predictive quality. It's not just reactive quality to have a vision-based system to inspect a well quality or a press shop quality. I'm talking about understanding the OT data better, because experience tells you that when the vibration exceeds certain threshold, it leads to bad quality or an equipment failure. Can we build models around it so you can predict the quality issue even before it happens, so you have an option to go fix the machine instead of producing bad quality parts? So we are working on multiple solutions in this area, again, with partners like Hitachi. The other major topic of interest is around energy and sustainability. Plant is a plant and they need electricity. A manufacturing plant in a small and medium businesses spend anything from $2 to $6 million on an annual electricity bill. Just by understanding data better, we can streamline that operation and provide savings anything from 8 to 15% just by understanding data better. If you do instrumentation on top of it, we can save additional energy. Huge interest area for our customers who want to talk to us on this topic. Again, Hitachi has solutions in this area. Last but not least is around digital twin. Digital twin spans factory facility for you to do a remote walkthrough or understand maintenance issues, safety issue, occupancy issue. Became more interesting after COVID last year and a lot more interest with customers. In addition to that, digital twin of factory floor processes, inbound logistics, outbound logistics, and also digital twin of your own products, what you are manufacturing. All three of it has huge interest for customers. We are building solutions in this area as well, and providing a lot of capability with our IoT and AI/ML services which we have today. So a lot of interest in this area. So again, these are the sample use cases. As I said, this is not an exhaustive list. Again, the foundational for this is to bring your IT world and the OT world together to accomplish all of it. All these use cases, you cannot enable just with OT data. You need IT data as well. We take both into account. Okay. And the biggest question now is, how do you get started? Again, that Sid touched upon it. If I have to summarize it, AWS provides this technology foundation and a framework and solution elements. It's not just enough for you to be successful, customers. You not only have to look at technology, you have to look at people and process side of it. And this needs a lot of transformational work at a plant floor level to transform that particular group to operate based on data-driven insights. That involves process change. That involves sometimes organizational change as well compared to how the customers are operating. That's where the partners like Hitachi, they bring in the skill set. They provide multiple solutions on top of an offering like this to make this into a reality. To get it started, we work with partners like Hitachi to go do a proof of value. While we are executing a proof of value, again, the proof of value can be anything from 4 weeks to just to do an ROI analysis for the customer, or it can be an 8-week journey where we can build a production-ready solution. We take a real plant, a real line, and go build a production-ready solution with a solution framework like what I talked about. In that 8 weeks time frame, you get a production-ready solution, and which you can rinse and repeat it and deploy it across multiple other lines or factory facility. Obviously, long enough in the business to know that maturity of no two plants are same, even if I talk to a very advanced manufacturing companies out there. We have to do a maturity assessment across the 30, 40, or 100 factories around the world. Can it consume this Industry 4.0 solution, or we have to do additional PLC coding, sensorization, or we have to do some even fundamental connectivity, which the plant might be lacking. So we do a maturity assessment. Again, that's where Hitachi brings in a lot of skill set as well. And we identify high, medium, and low maturity customers, where high maturity plants can immediately consume the solution we are building as part of proof of value, while we work on a maturity improvement strategy for the medium and low maturity plants out there. And in addition to that, even in a same customer between two different facilities, for example, in the auto world, between final assembly versus powertrain versus press shop versus welding area, use case priorities are different. So we have to work with the customer to identify all the top 150 use cases, and then come up with a make-buy strategy for them on how we can build those solutions on top of it. Press quality solution, our downtime reduction solution, our weld predictive quality solution, things like that. Some of it, we might have it available already in our marketplace in Amazon, or Hitachi might have already available, or some of it we have to go build it. all of it is a reality. So we take this three-pronged approach to help transform the customer. This, again, as I said, is a very prescriptive offering between AWS and partners like Hitachi. If you want to do a production journey, it's an 8-week journey. If you want to do an ROI analysis, it's a 4-week journey. So that's how we are transforming companies. We are building solutions from Amazon side. Again, for us, this is a journey. I talked about Industry 4.0 initiative. We have built solutions similar to that in multiple other areas like warranty, recall topics, and multiple other areas. So happy to talk to customers on that. I think that's pretty much what I had for today's presentation.
Great. Thanks again, Pugal. The Q&A volume spiked during your presentation. Clearly lots of interest and understanding of the backbone of an industrial IoT solution. We'll dive into that in a minute. So now it's time to transition to the Q&A portion of today's session, where we will take, or we already have taken, many of your questions from the audience. As a reminder, we have two options for submitting questions today. You can use the Q&A tool on the Zoom webinar, or you can submit them via Twitter using the hashtag Hitachi Vantara _IIoT. Hashtag Hitachi Vantara _IIoT. And to answer a whole bunch of the questions that came in, yes, the content for today's session will be available after the conclusion of the conference. In the event if we run out of time and we can't get through all of the questions, we will carry the conversation over to social media and address them there via Twitter, once again using that same hashtag Hitachi Vantara _IIoT. Okay, so panelists, some questions have come in. I'm going to start with Jay. Warm me back up again after been silent for a few minutes. I know we can't keep you silent for long. Question came in. Jay, from your experience, which industry sectors are most resilient to change and to implement IoT and Industry 4.0 technology plans? Can you speak to some specific industries that are perhaps more prepared, more ready, or maybe need it more than others? Just curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, so I walked through the example of 297 sub-industries. So we do look at it at that level, and interested in buyers and the geographies. I think a question came in on LATAM as well. The fact of the matter is, there are disruption levels happening everywhere. When I said that every company is becoming a technology company, industrial IoT is actually, in many cases, the tip of the spear on how they're getting there. I use the forklift example, and by the way, I use that example almost in front of every audience, just to walk them outside of a normal example. But the fact of the matter is, for that particular company, and for every company in every industry, in many cases, it is adding a sensor. It is adding a piece of technology that drives data in their industry that they've never had before. And so I look at industries like distribution and wholesale that are going through complete transitions right now. And these are forced transitions, because the growth of marketplaces, the growth of Amazon.com and Alibaba, and the growth of super marketplaces and the changing buyer behaviors, it's changing in front of us how we're going to procure as customers and business customers, everything. When you go and walk on that one step further, in a world that isn't product SKU or driven by what we'll call atoms, in a world that products are going to be based on bits, the entire model changes. The entire supply chain that we've looked at for 100 years changes. And so all of the manufacturing industries, all of the supply chain industries, everything is being forced now into a different model inside an ecosystem, and huge opportunities in Internet of Things and industrial IIoT. So the other industries, I mean, we have the pandemic K-shaped recovery. When you're in retail, hospitality, restaurants, and areas that could get benefit, don't have the ability because they're in survival mode at the moment. So this K-shaped recovery has changed our predictions and changed our trajectory. And you could walk through and probably stack rank all of those 297, and that'd be interesting research to do.
Sure. Pugal, Sid, willing to make any call in any particular industries or sub-industries?
from my point of view, like I know COVID has been a shock to the system, but there has been some winners and some losers. And so like food and bev, the critical manufacturing areas, I mean, they didn't had a choice. Like they were deemed essential, and then we had to work with them to make it work. So I mean, some of the luxury side items, like they were not that lucky. So that is kind of my view. Was a lot of it was forced on us. We had to live or die, and then I guess from our side, as a manufacturer and a service provider, we had to work with them to make it possible. And that's kind of my short answer.
Another question came in that was interesting. Try to distill it here. How do you, and I'm going to point this to Sid as the practitioner, how do you split value, or how do you identify the value when value creation is often not predetermined or pre-specified at the beginning of a development activity? How do you justify a project when the value creation is often determined only once the data is collected? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll actually challenge the question a little bit. I mean, there is two sides of responding it. One is the strategy, correct? Like you do have a strategy that you will design, and it could be a market driven or yourself driven. It's like when Jay mentioned people are moving to SaaS. I mean, it is kind of technology driven and market driven. You have to go there. So we know the value of SaaS, like as an ROI, to the customer, to ourselves. So if you deploy AWS solution for SaaS, you're going to get operational improvement, and then customer can have subscription. So first answer is, yeah, we do understand strategically and model it what the ROI should be upfront before we start. The second answer is, how do manufacturers actually do that? Means you heard everybody talk about KPIs, correct? Like KPIs is how the world is broken down into. You have an OEE, you have a first time through, and they kind of reflect how your business ROI or calculations are done. If you can move some of those KPIs, hoping all the strategy is still the same, you can monitor the progress. So that's how I look at it. So most of our solutions go in, can I improve OEE by 1%? And like Ford is what Fugal was mentioning, correct? Like Ford runs at like 95 to 97% on some of their very high streamline. And they are talking like decimal improvements on like, but that is how we look at it. So once data comes out, then we can say, can we actually go even further? Can we go even further? And of course, this side, which is strategy. And I'm sure Fugal might have a few more of his personal experience to add to this.
Right. Just to add to that, David, what Sid mentioned, when we take a journey with customers in a prescriptive approach like what I talked about, our recommendation usually is we measure the as-is scenario of whatever we are trying to do with the customer, because there is a business outcome customer has in mind. Whether it is improvement in productivity or improvement in quality metrics or reduction in inventory or optimize the number of AGVs operating in the plant floor, there is a metric they have in mind. Because we know that even within a single customer, two different plants compete against each other on how efficient that particular setup is compared to the other. So usually there is well-defined outcomes out there. That's why when we take this journey, we measure the assets and set up reasonable goals to say that I'm going to transform together with the customer and partners like you. This is the number we have in mind. That is 10% improvement or 30%, whatever the number is. That's how we go do this work and prove it out as part of the journey. That's what customers want to see, because for them to go scale the solution, they need approval from their own board. And if you don't establish this kind of business value proposition, it doesn't have the legs to stand. We do this all the time.
Yeah, I would say, just to add on one at the end, at a 10,000 foot level, 10 years ago, we were very early in this journey, and early adopters were making a leap of faith that value creation, 1 + 1 = 3, but didn't know the math. Network effects, 1 + 1 = 5. And co-innovation, 1 + 1 = 10. But again, how that translated into their company and into, how they would talk through to their CEO and CFO was different. Well, a decade on, we're in early majority now. There are millions of use cases. So the modeling and the, kind of looking left and looking right into your own spot in the market, 35 million spots in the market. We do have what I'll call some, guiding points now and some educated guessing that at least brings it down, not to the decimal point, but at least into an area where a board and, venture capitalists and private equity and others would listen. So we are moving on. So, let's not think that this is a leap of faith anymore. And let's start looking at this, as a more mature industry, but still not hitting a home run in terms of, getting to the decimal point, but we will in the next decade.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. This next question is for Jay and Pugal, likely. Jay, I'll stick with you for a moment. And Pugal, your audio is a little bit off, comes and goes. Maybe you wouldn't mind taking your headset off, maybe, if you can, maybe for the remainder of the session might be helpful. Question, as a student of security, I want to understand the perspective of how this upcoming change in business models, Jay, as you described, will impact the market of security. Will there be new fields that will evolve, such as a consumption market becoming the new normal? Can you speak a little bit on the kind of impact or downstream adjustment we need to think about when it comes to security?
Yeah, absolutely. And I made the quick comment that you can't talk about security unless you talk about the 7 layers of security and then the 17 layers below that. So the amount of threat vectors today and accelerating vectors, as you see vendors being attacked, as you see governments being attacked, and then this new future of work being attacked. We're seeing new layers of ransomware and malware, and we're seeing new vectors almost every day. And we've got an industry of almost 10,000 vendors now that are trying to solve the problem in slightly different ways. And this is an industry example of where there's no one vendor that solves for it all. So there's a security stack from a technology perspective. But as you look at industrial IoT and you're looking at the edge, you're looking at the network security, you're obviously wrapping around the edge security, the zero trust models, you're looking at the web security, the data security, the application security. So there are 7 layers that wrap around that, perhaps that actual device, the plastic wrap sensor. And, your antivirus firewall theories from 5 years ago are starting to sound like 50 years ago. And, this idea that, you're going to block yourself from being hacked. People are moving up beyond that you are going to be hacked. And now it's about mitigation and risk and compliance and governance and control in terms of narrowing that vector. So when you are hacked, that, they don't get to the crown jewels. So internally, externally, as a security professional, if I'm looking to develop a career today, you've got a solid 30 to 40 years of, high income, high demand for your services, because it changes literally every day in terms of how we frame up this opportunity.
Sure. Well, you touched on security. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I kind of adjusted my headset. Hopefully it's better now, David.
Yes, it's better.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So security again is primary thing for AWS. Pretty much all our services, that is the foundational thing which we take care of it. And if we take our IoT services, we have capabilities built into it like Device Defender, elemental services, which takes care of security and things like that. In addition to that, it becomes far more important when I go into a defense and manufacturing segment in that area. We have to have compliancy to various other regulatory compliance out there, which we support as well. And also we have iSecure area, cloud areas as well. So extremely important. Foundationally, we take care of it at every level. So yeah, I cannot agree more with what Jay mentioned as well.
Okay, great. Question for Sid. Will industrial IoT replace MES?
So I think that's two things are being merged together, correct? Like industrial IoT is not a thing, correct? I mean, industrial IoT is kind of a concept where you can solve many things. MES is a function, I'll say, which is deployed by a software, and it has vendors. And my theory is, The manufacturing execution as a function will be enabled by industrial IoT. Will the solution become digital in nature that you can do it? Yes, the answer is definitely yes. And I mean, it can be done by the same vendors. I think they're all trying to do it. So if you look at any of the functions like quality management or MES or manufacturing or supply chain control tower, those solutions used to be transaction systems. So I will plan, I will make 70 cars will need this, hence you do this. Great. Now they are becoming more alive. So they actually can adjust and reprioritize when the world sees is like, hey, go make 70 and oh, I don't actually have one part. Maybe let's not make the blue one, let's make the gray one. And the industrial IoT is now going to provide a few things, correct? So you have the stack that you saw from sensor where you start getting data, you start getting connectivity, you start getting decision-making power. So MES will become a lot more closed loop, alive function. So the planning and execution will be live. It will be enabled by industrial IoT. Yes, you can, for a small company, do it on, I guess, just on AWS, I guess, using writing some Lambda functions. I mean, for a very small thing, you can do that. It's just manufacturing execution. So it will be enabled, it will be live, it will be closed loop. It is not going to kill the MES industry as a product because you can't really run a Ford production line using Lambda functions. It will be too hard. So, but that's what I foresee.
Fair enough. Any other comments, Pugal?
No, I think Sid answered it so well. This is a common ask from customers as well, David. As Sid mentioned, that transformation is coming. There is going to be a tighter integration between MES and industrial IoT. There is going to be definitely changes to the MES system. That is the transformation we are seeing as well, and cannot agree more with what Sid said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, movement of transactional systems to analytical systems. Of course, yes, it makes a lot of sense. I know we're getting a little tight on time. I think one last question that is sort of pervasive amongst the series of questions that we've got in, which kind of gets curious from all members of the panel. A lot of questions around vendor selection, which IoT platform to choose. How do we pick a technology vendor? I guess looking for across the board, maybe starting with Jay, then Sid, then Pugal. Can you comment just a little bit on either some maybe the criteria that flies to the top, or any specific gotchas you can comment on or recommend as it comes to picking IoT platforms and help our audience with that selection.
I'll go first. It's something I wake up every morning thinking about, because when there's 800,000 emerging tech vendors and there's 175,000 software companies growing to 1 million, and there's millions of other service firms, there's no calculator that's going to return, the right number. So where you need to start, I showed that one graphic where if you start with your customer in the middle, there today is 35 million permutations in the market where IIoT fits. But if you start talking at the granular level, when I show those 5 vectors, who your buyer is by role, where they are geography, what sub-industry they're in, the sector size and segment of that firm, and then the specific business outcomes or the product itself, hardware, software, services. If you can answer those 5 vectors, I can take millions of permutations and we can start talking about the 50 or so vendors that could earn the 7-layer cake that I showed. And there are places that AWS hits a home run, and there are places that it doesn't. And again, AWS is not in 35 million places, and neither is Hitachi. And in some cases, it might be 2 guys in a garage. And so, if you start everything with customer obsession in the middle and then work outwards, what they read, where they go, who they follow, who's in that place, then you can kind of start from there and move out to, short list from a vendor perspective and a services perspective. Who is the most influential and who today, but by the way, tomorrow's going to be different, today would drive the best outcome.
Sure. Okay, Sid?
So it's a very difficult and biased answer. But I'll try to be
okay. We can take that. We expect that.
So one thing from my point of view, I kind of started my IoT journey in Deloitte. So I was a kind of an independent consultant. So I still remember those days. First thing to look at is IIoT or industrial IoT is not one thing. You're not going to buy one thing that will do everything. And you should not even try to do that, correct? Like it's not, there is no ERP, SAP that will do everything. You have to break it down to which part you're buying for, correct? Like so that will actually help you understand as to the layers of the cake, correct? Like what are you buying for and what do you get? Then what's your buying power also helps. I mean, so the scale of the solution. And then, I mean, without going in a lot of vendor choosing, like you should think about, do you want a solution or do you want a platform for each of those layers? Like, do you want an analytical platform? Can you build it yourself? Or do you want a fully baked solution? I think once you think like that, like your answers might be a little bit different. I mean, you can see, as Jay was saying, the adoption of the cloud grows, like platform vendors. They're already like 10 billion and they're still growing at 50%. I'm like, I mean, it kind of gives you a message. Okay, people who want to build their own want a platform, or people who make solution are going on that. So that's one answer, kind of, you can choose. But then, what do you need from that, from a solution point of view? That would be kind of how do you decide, and then I guess trust some of the partners who are your long-term partners to help make a decision. Because if you go down and start looking at every startup and every big company and what they do and what they don't do based on marketing literature, God help you. So, I want to hear what you're going to say.
No, I think I would, maybe my answer would be biased as well, but I like the way you said it. There is a platform layer and there is a solution layer on top of it. What we provide usually is at a platform level. We provide a platform for industrial IoT, for data ingestion, compute, IT, OT alignment, dashboarding, condition monitoring, things like that. But what really value that driven at a plant floor or anywhere else is around solutions, which is going to be built on top of it. That's a whole different layer. I would argue this way. You would need both. At least for medium-sized companies and bigger, you cannot buy a solution and hope it to work across 30 different plants, because you need a robust underlying platform without which your scalability, security, and all the other fun things is taken care. If it is, maybe it's a smaller companies, they might get away with buying point solutions. It works, but quickly they run out of steam and they acquire more and more plants and things like that. Again, I like the idea about splitting it between platform and solutions. And I think goes back to also what Jay said. The solution has to have the customer in the middle. What is the value it is driving? You are buying it for a reason. Does it provide that value to that particular customer? So that's how I look at it.
Great. No, thank good insight. Thank you. Lucian, we're at time. I'll pass it back to you.
All right, thank you, everybody. First off, I'm super excited about the type of questions that were brought up. So we had about 40 people. It's such all great questions. Everybody's going to be offered a chance to join the VIP community. So we're not going to do a drawing. We're just going to invite everybody. So I was super excited about Jay's kind of like futuristic view of what the opportunities it's ahead of us. Sid and Pugal, thank you for addressing the small to mid-sized companies. I've always tried to raise that in front of a lot of the C-level people. What are you doing for 20 people, for companies that are 20 people or less? So I appreciate you looking at that. I wanted to kind of remind everybody that we are, if you will, having an industrial IoT World Day focused on manufacturing on May 18th. I'm sorry, March 18th. That's next month. So there's roughly about 8 sessions coming up. And with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, the speakers, David, for moderation, much appreciated, and keeping the conversation engaged. And thank you, the sponsor, Hitachi Ventura, for this session. With that, this concludes the program for today.
Thank you.